Hello everyone, Ruthless Reg here, currently ranked 10th in the global leaderboards of Champions TCG, and for today's video we will be talking about how you, if you're a new player or someone who's already a veteran of the game, can have a competitive edge by building a strong deck that you can actually farm the daily payouts and use in the daily tournaments of Champions TCG using a starter deck and tweaking it a bit by adding a few cards here and there and having a powerhouse to grind all of these on a daily basis. Let's jump right in. In the world of Champions TCG, there are a ton of different decks to build towards, but for this video, I'll be showing you 3 different decks based off of the starter deck that can actually cater to your playstyle, whether or not you're a combo player, an aggressive player, or a control player. Let's jump right in and head over to the deck builder. So first, let's bring up the starter deck, and to do that, just head on over to My Decks, press on Starter Deck 2 Season 4. Everyone should have this. This is all of the cards that are available for that starter deck. So first one is my own personal playstyle, which is an aggressive / mid-range good stuff deck. And to build that, we need to remove everything that feels slow or doesn't do anything at the time it comes into play. And for the starter deck, we're keeping everything except cards like Timber Fawn that don't do anything when they come in, Astraling as well. These cards are very strong, but it doesn't fit our playstyle. Bog is an evolution baby, we're removing that. Voidra, the evolution of Astraling, is gone as well. Elcantler, we're removing this. Quaka, Hydroblast, not too good. Berry Cane, we're keeping that. Sanger, we're removing this as well. We've got Fungorth, which is actually dealing 5 damage to everything that is below 5 HP or less, so we're keeping that just as a sweeper for the deck. And then we're removing Charlene as well, which is an Earthquake, deal 8 damage. What we are keeping instead is Perp. Perp is an egg. It's a 1 cost 0/1. Let's actually show all of the eggs in the deck. These evolve into something else. Like for example, based on the element, like this Perp is a dark element and it can evolve to a Booger, which is another dark element as well, which is that. It can also evolve into Booger's evolution, which is Blight 2's, which is also very solid. So we're keeping Perp, Booger, and Blight 2's. Hex is very strong because it can turn a unit that used to be very powerful, like for example a big unit or something with a scary on-death ability, like Retribution or Shatter. It just becomes a random unit. The catch is it's going to be 3 HP or less. It can sometimes be a 1/1. Or it can sometimes be their highest rolly card would be a 7 attack, 3 life unit, which is something scary on their side of the field, but nothing compared to what it was usually when we play this card. So these are some of our staples that we're keeping in. Teal is air, which can evolve into any other air unit, and for these in the starter deck, Straw Bash is very solid. It's an air unit that can actually get an evolution of a card and put it into your hand with the Windseeker ability, or it can actually target any unit that doesn't have an evolution in your deck and just draw a card. And its stat line with its 3 mana, 5 attack, and 6 health is very strong for a unit that costs only 3. So we're keeping that, and we're keeping the evolution of Straw Bash, which is Berry Cane, which does the same thing but with a higher stat line. Higher mana, higher power, and higher health. The highest end on the air curve is Cyclonius, which is a 9 cost 6/8 unit with the power of Typhoon, which on play, it dishes out 8 damage to everything on the opponent's side of the field only. So all of their units get hit for 8 damage and the player itself gets hit by 8 damage as well. So very strong. Very cool thing is, Teal is an air egg, which means Cyclonius can evolve from Teal by spending only 1 cost, 1 mana, instead of its original 9 cost, because any evolution will only cost you 1 mana. And all of these are from the starter deck, folks. So let's remove the air units, and now, finally, the Fuchsia Egg, which can hatch into anything cosmic. And our cosmic stuff are usually the cards that actually change the field a lot. Like we've got Fuku here, which can quantum shift and swap a unit from the opponent's side with Fuku. So if they only have a big unit, they get Fuku, and we get their big unit, and then that big unit can immediately attack and swing at the Fuku we just gave them. So that's the cool thing about Quantum Shift. It used to be more powerful, but now it only gets the lowest HP unit on the opponent's side of the battlefield. And then aside from that, we've got Bofa Tinker Time Never Late, which is a 3-cost, 5-attack, 7-health unit with a power that has Time Warp, which means you target any unit and it evolves into the next unit. If you target Straw Bash, it will evolve immediately into Barricane, getting you that Windseeker ability as well, without having the Barricane card, and also developing your unit by having Bofa Tinker Time Never Late in play as well. So all of these are very strong tempo plays, and that is what the starter deck provides immediately. And on top of that, let's add other units on. For example, Vile Moth, which is the evolution of Vile Grub, which we have also in the starter deck, which has Soul Reaper, which is a 2-cost 2/5 unit. And what it does is whenever another unit dies, it gets +1/+1. So as long as Vile Grub stays on the battlefield and units are trading with each other, Vile Grub becomes bigger. And this is only a 2-cost 2/5 unit. We almost always never evolve this into Vile Moth, which is its next evolution. But Vile Moth is very strong on its own that we're including it in the deck as well. So Vile Moth is a 3-cost 4/6 unit that can actually raise dead and get back anything from the top of your graveyard into the battlefield again for a cost of 6 health but no mana at all. So it's a very strong tempo play. We've got Mune, which is another one that we're adding in. And what it does, it's got 3-cost 1/1, but it's got the same power as Fuku, which swaps with another unit. It's better than Fuku in the sense that you're giving a weaker unit, a 1/1 unit, and a 3-cost unit, which sometimes when you give Fuku, they can bounce it up, and then they play their Fuku that we just gave them, basically. So with this, it's harder to bounce and replay on the turn that we give them Mune. So we're not obliged to kill Mune as soon as we pass Mune to them. We're adding Vroom as well, which is a 1-cost 1/1 unit that has Combustion that deals 5 to 8 damage to a unit and to yourself. So for example, if they've got a Bofa Tinker Time Never Late in play, you hit it, hope that you hit a 7. Worst case scenario, you hit them with a 5 and trade with a smaller unit. But for the cost of 1 mana, Vroom is very strong. Let's add Pukey as well, which has Greed. It's a 2-cost 4/4 unit, and the power of Greed is if it's the only unit in play on your side of the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. If it's not the only unit, you draw 1 card. So it's a very strong play on turn 2 that actually has a beefy body, considering it already draws you a card the turn you play it, or draws you 2 cards the turn you play it, depending on your board state. And then next is Bobby, which is a 2-cost unit that has Whirlwind, which bounces anything with health 5 or less back to the hand, which is very strong as a tempo play because you can bounce a unit that doesn't have an ability from the opponent's side, just like the cards we removed from the deck. You can just bring it back and it's like they wasted a turn. Aside from that, Bobby evolves into Chubwing, which is this guy, which is a 3-cost 4/6 unit, and has Windseeker, which is the same as our Straw Bash card. And aside from that, Chubwing is the end curve of Bubby. So this guy evolves into this and draws cards after bouncing something, basically. But Chubwing on its own, it's still a very strong card. It's a 3-cost 4/6 unit that can actually get you an evolution or draw you a card if needed. So all of these stay in the deck. And next is Demothra. This is Vile Moth's evolution. It's a 6-cost 9/9 unit that can raise dead. So this can come in, bring back something, and have a big unit. This is a 9/9, aside from the unit that you just resurrected. And that is the full 35 cards of our Good Stuff deck. This is it. There's a lot to work with here. For example, you've got a lot of different raise dead units. Some of these are pricing from $20 to $30 on the marketplace, but easy replacements, although they won't have the evolution of the Vile Moth into Demothra, is something like Meat Cuz, which is a 5-cost 5/8 raise dead unit, and Mysticonda as well, 5-cost 7/7. There's also Scoro. This is just a baseline for you to build towards, and this is the first deck that we're talking about, the Midrange Goodstuff deck. Next, let's talk about combo decks. A combo deck that has a lot of potential is something called Supercharge, and Supercharge is if you have 10 or more cards in your hand these cards come into play with double the stats. Which means, for example, if this was 3 cost 4/4, it comes in as a 3 cost 8/8. But aside from that, it also has Rush, which means it can immediately swing on top of the huge stat line that it brings to the table. So for example, this is a 4 cost 12/12 unit that comes into play and swings hard after coming in. And to do that, the only condition it needs, it is quite tricky though, is you need to have 10 or more cards in hand the turn you're playing it. If it is the 10th card in your hand, it works as well. So that is the catch. And to do that, you need a ton of greed. So all of the cards with greed is definitely coming in. And what is the power of greed? Greed is you're drawing 2 cards at the catch of you need it to be the only unit on the battlefield. And to do that, we don't want any tiny units to begin with. So everything else that is tiny is going away from the deck, which means all of our eggs are going away. These are all 1 costs. Fuku we're keeping because we're not really using Fuku on turn 1 unless you can. Comes in as a 4/4, it's still solid beater, but we're keeping it as a way to just swap a unit from the opponent's side of the battlefield. Imagine if they have the 16/16 with Rush. We swap it with Fuku and suddenly we're swinging hard as well. Let's remove all of the eggs. Let's remove the Timber Fawn. Let's remove Vile Grub as well. Astraling's going. Bog's going. Straw Bash, we're keeping that. It's still a card draw engine, and it has its own thing, which means that when we play it, it's going to be drawing us cards. Very solid. Voidra we're removing as well. Both a Tinker Time Never Late we're keeping because it can evolve our supercharged cards. Elcantler we're removing. Booger we're keeping that. Quaka we're removing as well. Fungorth and Sangur we're removing. Berry Cane, we are going to be keeping Berry Cane because it's draw cards as well. Blightooth is going. Charlene is going, and Cyclonius is going. And this is what we're starting with to build our combo supercharged deck. There are a lot of cards to add in, but most of these cards are commons, and these are quite easy to build. First, let's put in greed. So let's search for greed, and anything with greed and low costs, we're putting in. Ami is good, but its health is too low. It's got 2 life, basically, so we're not putting in Ami. Business, 2 cost, 2/2 greed, strong. Peloton is 3 cost 4/4 greed, is strong. Cream Puff 2 cost 2/2 greed, very strong as well. Puke we're putting in as well, 2 cost 4/4 greed. Puke has an evolution which is Vomenticle, but we're not necessarily putting it in. You can find room for it, don't get me wrong. Vomenticle is a very strong evolution, and if you got Puke on the field and then you add Vomenticle, Puke evolves into Vomenticle, and if it's the only unit, you draw a card from the evolution and then you draw 2 cards from greed, which means playing this on the Puke, you draw 3 cards. Let's put in all of the supercharge this time that we feel is strong. Trip Fuse, anything 3 cost we're putting in because we want to be supercharging as soon as possible. So 3 costs are all in. Evolutions of Joltilla, which is Thunderilla, 6 cost 8/9. But if you look at it, it's a 6 cost 16/18 rush. That's coming in. Tormander is good. It's the evolution of Voltizard. And then we're putting in 2 Crackles as well, which is a 4 cost 12/12 rusher. So we're putting all of these into the deck. And now we're left with 7 slots for our deck. We still have a bit of room, which means let's put in some Vroom. These are strong cards. These are the combustion units we talked about earlier that dish out 5 to 8 damage, so those are coming in. Anything that draws cards and bounces we're putting in, so Booby and its evolution Chubwing is coming in as well. Add one of the other supercharged units, which is the one without the evolution but the highest stat line, which is Miniature. So that's a very solid combo deck. And lastly, let's talk about a control deck. Let's go back into the starter decks. Let's remove everything that we don't find relevant for this metagame, and let's add in Zap. Zap is quite unique in the sense that if the unit comes into play, it dishes out 2 damage to 2 random things. But aside from that, Zap also happens when the unit attacks. So if you're attacking the player, it zaps the 2 other units for 2 damage each. And that's why we're calling this a control deck, because as soon as you have a multitude of zaps, you just attack player, 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 and every single attack is going to be zapping 2 cards for 2 damage each, which means you're clearing the board every single time you're attacking the player. Very strong. The catch of this is it doesn't have a lot of attack power. These zap units are 2 cost 2 4s compared to something like Puke, which draws you 2 cards and is a 4/4 as well. But it has the benefit of zapping everything for 2 damage. So we're removing Perp and we're removing Teal because we don't need the Air Evolution card side of things for this deck. We're keeping Cyclonius because it's still a strong cleaner, a strong board wiper, which combos really well with our zap cards. But we're removing most of everything that doesn't fit the zap mechanism. So we're removing the Charlene, we're removing the Sanger as well, we're removing the Fungorth. We're keeping the card draw stuff, which is the Straw Bash and the Barricane, because it's just good. And then we're removing Quaka, Elcantler, Voidra, Bog, Astraling. Vile Grub doesn't work for us. Timberfawn doesn't work for us. And then we're keeping Fuku, Fuchsia, Strawbash, Bofa, Tinker Time, Never Late, Booger, Barricane, and Cyclonius. And from here, let's add in all of the zap stuff. We're adding in Thunderpur. We're adding in 1 Spark Main, which is its evolution. We're adding in 2 Zappies, 1 Electrosaur, which is also its evolution. We're adding Voldrakes, which is a 4 cost 6/6. And we're adding Zapicide, which is a 1 cost 1/1 unit that zaps everything the turn it comes into play. So very strong for a 1 cost unit. So those are the zappers. Let's add another egg into the fray, which is the Azure, which is the lightning element egg for our zap evolutions. So we're putting those in. And aside from that, let's add in the good stuff that we added in earlier as well, which is Vroom. Dishes out combustion damage to a unit between 5 to 8 damage. Let's add in Bube as well, which is the bounce. And then Chubbing, as you see here, there's now a pattern. We're adding a few cards across all of these decks because they're just good on their own. So let's add Chubbing there as well. Now we're adding Mune as well, which is a strong quantum shift unit that is quite solid as well as an addition to this deck. And then aside from that, we're adding Vile Moth, which is the Raise Dead card that we talked about earlier that can bring back one of these units for a huge tempo swing at the cost of 6 life. And that is our full control zap deck, which can actually just decimate the board if it continues its algorithm of playing a card, zapping things, attacking, zapping again. It should keep the board clear, and that is the control zap deck for you. And that is everything about the starter deck based from my experience that we can build towards so that we can actually have a strong competitive deck to use in the daily ranked system to grind those daily payouts and to use in the relevant tournaments that require Gen 2, 3, and 4 cards, because that is actually what the ranked standard system is doing at the moment. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you'd like more of this content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That's us for now, and see you in the next video. Boom.